Now then, folks, here is G.I. Joe Classified Series Zarana figure in hand. Very excited to be receiving this. I've been purchasing import stock from the smaller, more independent adult collectible toy retailers here in the United Kingdom, and while that's costing me a couple of pennies more, well, that's a lie, it's costing me a fair few quid more, but it does have its advantages because I'm getting a little bit ahead of the curve from everyone else when figures like Zarana arrive. So very, very pleased and excited to have this in hand. It's long overdue as well. My Zartan has been lonely. He's been lonely on the shelf. He needs one of his fellow Dreadnok buddies, and so here's one to add to the roster. So let's take a quick look at the figure. We've got windowed packaging here, probably one of the last in the G.I. Joe Classified series to have windowed packaging, but it's showing off the figure and all the lovely goodies. Always lots of extra added value with G.I. Joe Classified, which is always exciting. Then we got this kind of comic book, cartoony representation of the figure. I'm a fan of this artwork. I like it. I like the bold, striking lines. They go along with the kind of bold, striking colours that Zarana is wearing, so that's working it for me. Big fan, big fan. Then on the back, we've got the G.I. Joe Classified kind of postery promo thing that we've seen on the back of the boxes for quite some time now, along with all the legal bollocks and malarkey here at the bottom. Then the sides, more of that comic book artwork. Again, more bold lines, striking colours, very energetic, lots of kind of dynamic action being communicated there. Big fan of that. I'm not a box keeper, but if you were a mint-in box keeper, then I can imagine that would catch your eye, create a lot of shelf presence there in the collection. Then on the other side, we've got the data card. I've not cross-referenced it against the website, but I'm pretty sure this is telling us that Zarana will provide bones for pets for money. She's pretty good at reading maps and finding directions. She does a bit of fishing on the side, but it looks like she's got a hole in her net, so she's having a bit of trouble on that front. And well, this one is obvious. This is the disguise element of the character, a big part of the character's kind of personality and attributes in the cartoon and the comic book. And she's number 48 in the range, which is also reflected on the top of the box there. So let's get Zarana open, shall we, and take a look. I'm going to go in from the bottom here. I've already cut the tape. Well, it says going from the bottom. There we go. Get my finger in. Oh, and of course, there's the paperwork. Slide her out here like that. Oh, so there's a thing. This is the backing card. I like the backing cards, but this is a standard Cobra backing card, not a Dreadnok one. I wonder if I've still got my Zartan one. I do have my Zartan one. There is a Dreadnok design. So, yeah, that's a bit of a disappointment, I suppose. I mean, not that it bothers me, but I'm abundant in these. Although I do have a Dreadnok one, so if I want to take some photos with that in the background, I can do. Then inside the blister part, let's see, we've got the hair change there. We have her little backpacky thing. We've got a kind of submachine gunny thing with a buzzsaw on the front, liking that. And the magazine for her weapon. Some really nasty looking kind of hot bladed knife battery powered thing, which looks really awesome. And a little kind of toothpicky stabby dagger there. And then of course, oh, I hate that noise, but there we have the figure herself. And there we are, there's Zarana with all her goodies out the packaging. Looking good. First impressions right out the packet are positive. But we'll get under the skin of that in more detail, because I'm now going to go away, pose her up, have a bit of a play, get her on display with some of my other G.I. Joe Classified figures, particularly the Cobra team, obviously. And then I'll come back in a few days to share some review thoughts for Zarana. So, yeah, for you, it'll just be a couple of seconds. Stick around to get my review. But for me, I'll see you in 2 or 3 days. And here we go. Here is the G.I. Joe Zarana figure. A couple of days later, as promised, I've been away. I've had some man-child playtime with my action figs. I've had Zarana out with Zartan, of course, natural pairing there to play around with. I've had her out with Lady J as well, some combat display diorama posy type things to do a bit of female G.I. Joe Classified figure comparisons. I've had her out with some troopers. She's been hanging out on the display with the twins. I've taken some photos. I've just been doing all the good stuff that any enormous man-child action figure play person like me would have. And I'm ready now to share some review thoughts and give you guys a bit of an overview of the G.I. Joe Classified Zarana figure. So, if you're new around these parts, very quick rundown. A MoDXtra Games and Collectibles review is structured in a very simple way I call the 3 A's. The first day, we're going to start by reviewing the aesthetic. Let's talk about how Zarana looks. The second day is articulation. So let's talk a little bit about how poseable she is. Let's talk about how she moves. Let's talk about how she feels in the joints. And then finally, the third day, we're going to talk about accessories and added value. What's all the extra goodies that come with the figure? How do they enhance the figure? How do they enhance the narrative, the play experience, all that good stuff? And by the end of the video, if you're thinking about picking up a G.I. Joe Classified Zarana of your own, hopefully my thoughts will help you make your mind up. So let's not dilly-dally around, let's get straight into it, and let's talk about the figure's aesthetic. Okay then, so I brought Zarana a bit nearer to the camera so that we can have a closer inspection of the finer aesthetic details, the finer aesthetic qualities of this figure. And the first thing that strikes you, I'm sure you'll all agree, is that Zarana brings a much needed splash of colour variety to the G.I. Joe Classified Cobra side of your display shelf. The orange, pink and purple dyed hair, the pink leather jacket, the bits of pink there in her ripped jeans just all really give her a distinctive shelf presence in amongst all the blue, black and red kind of uniform colour scheme that you get across the Cobra range. So when she's in amongst the Commander and the Vipers and well, actually, you know, there's an Alley Viper and there's Storm Shadow as well. But one of the reasons I like those figures so much, it's the same kind of qualifying factor here with Zarana. I just like that colour variety, that splash of colour in the mix. And it really makes her leap out on the shelf. So very pleased with the kind of colour combination. It's vibrant, it's dynamic, it really stands out. And that's just like proper awesome. Speaking of their colour, and the hair specifically, let's talk a bit more about what's going on here above the shoulders, because once again, this is yet another example of a really top-notch quality G.I. Joe Classified Series face sculpt we've got in front of us here right now. If for no other reason, then there's actually a facial expression going on. I know I bang on about it a lot. I know I've criticised basically every Marvel legend I had for months now for the same reason, but the gritted teeth, the expression in the facial features, you know, the chin, the cheekbones, the eyebrows and stuff, the eyes, I mean, look at the eyes. It's telling a story. There's a narrative there. She is an angry punk rock chick, and that's exactly what you're getting from the facial expression. Not only that, though, she's a warrior punk rocker, and so you're getting that kind of warrior anger in the eyes and in the gritted teeth and the kind of steely, firm cheeks and jaw, and that's awesome. That's great. I love being able to have a bit of a narrative kind of headcanon story going on with my figures, and that's exactly what's going on here. And then throw in the fact that it's a lovely, neat paint app job. The lips, the teeth, the eyeliner, the eyes, the eyebrows, all really fine detail, very neat and tidy. And there's even a little bit of blush in the cheeks. She's been popping the old makeup on, the old punk rock look makeup, and that's all really exceptional. Very, very pleased with that. And I have to confess, when I first saw this figure, the digital renders and then the promo shots, whatever it was, whatever stream reveal they did, I was a little bit skeptical about the face sculpt, if I'm being honest. I was a bit, I'm not so sure about that, but now I've got it in hand, I'm like, yeah, okay, nailed it. Once again, G.I. Joe Classified, an excellent job. And then, of course, the hair, really well sculpted with lots of texture and depth in there. There's a little bit of a wash as well to bring to life the dyed colour schemes, you know, your more purpley, your orange, your pink, which is all really awesome, and add to the kind of character experience. And this is one of the distinctive features of Zarana as well, is the dyed hair, although we'll look at the head swapped in the hair swap in a minute. But yeah, really pleased with that, and it just sits atop the excellent face sculpt really, really well. And while I've got her over here as well, look at the detail in the ears and the earrings too. Just excellent, really pleased with that. Always very happy with what's going on above the shoulders in terms of aesthetic on G.I. Joe Classified. Moving further down, taking in more of the main body of the figure, we can see lots of other nice, lovely little details that really bring it to life. Once again, there's loads of texture in here, like you got this little chainmail piece on the shoulder, we've got the layers there on the shoulder pad, there's texture here in this, what do you call that, the armbands, the wrist guards, whatever those are. Then like the zip here across the leather cutaway jacket, really neat paint app jobs as well. Look at the zips on the pockets and on the side of the jacket, and the buckle here on the strap, really awesome. While I'm talking about straps and buckles and chains, there's more further down. Finer detail in the belt, although they have skimped out a bit on painting the actual buckle. Which I can forgive in light of all the other lovely finer details, but still, it's like, oh, they've taken the time to put all these zips in and the chainmail and make the knife sheath look leathery, but they've not done the belt buckle, which strikes me as an odd choice, because she's even got, like, you know, she's got her wallet chain in there as well, and that's all sculpted in and painted, really super neat and tidy. It's very, very good, but yeah, not the belt buckle. Don't know what that's all about. But then carrying on down into the figure, you can see the texture in the trousers look very, you know, a typically denim jeanie. You can see that texture there. Got this splash of colour in the rip sections. We've got the padded bits, which kind of bring her a little bit more uniformly in line with that kind of protective padding across all the Cobra figures. Then the knee pads have got texture in them. All really awesome. And the boots, let's have a closer look at the boots. Look at them. Brilliant. These like cowboy boots that she's wearing. Got all the leather stitching in there. Can you see all the leather stitching on that? We've got some pattern here in the foot and the steel toe cap there, really awesome. The leather strap across the top, and then look at the metallic paintwork and the stirrups that have been sculpted at the back. That's some lovely fine detail. And you know, that's not, you know, there's no reuse there. Those have been sculpted specifically for Zarana to wear. Really wonderful. Just, yeah, they just don't know how not to make a lot of effort, do they, the G.I. Joe Classified team? Which begs the question, why didn't they paint the belt buckle? But there you go. But yeah, look at them boots. Amazing. They really caught my eye. And I hadn't noticed them up until the figure being in my hand. The size and shape is good as well, and the sculpting in the face, the quality of the sculpting there carries on down into the figure. Like if you look at this kind of open midriff area here, she's showing off the abs. She's a warrior. She might be a bit punk rock, and she is a female figure in the line, but she's a warrior, and so you can see, you know, she's been doing the working out. She's got the warrior figure about her, which is really awesome, and the sculpting is subtle, but tells the story once again, you know, that Zarana is an ass kicker. She kicks butt, takes names, chews gum, and then, you know, wears their face. Not in a psychopath kind of way, like in a disguise kind of way, because that's what the character does. Well, I don't know, maybe in a more grimdark way, if you wanted to headcanon that, you could. But I meant, you know, steals their identity to go and spy on people like the Joes, not literally carving people's faces off. But yeah, you know, that the abs area, the revealed midriff, you know, it's selling that punk rock chic image that she has. But it's also telling us, you know, she's a warrior. She works out. She kicks ass. She's action as much as she is nice to look at as well. And I really appreciate that effort. That's really awesome too. One aesthetic area that has bothered me a little bit, which is kind of more articulation, but is the aesthetic element that has bugged me. Where the top of the thighs, where the legs go into the groin area in this joint here. I mean, is the standard G.I. Joe Classified sort of drop-down joint. I'll talk about that a bit more in terms of articulation in a moment. But can you see it just sort of sits and juts out a little uncomfortably at the front, and there's some strange gaps in there. And there's been a couple of poses that I've put her into where that aspect of I'm an action figure has really stood out. Now, this is probably an engineering problem more than anything else. I did wonder at first, when I first took it out of the packet and started playing around with it, I was like, have they been put on back to front? But they haven't, because the seams, you know, the seam line down the jeans matches up. It's all in the right place from the hip to that joint at the top there. I don't know what that's called, top of the thigh section, and then into the actual thigh here. It all lines up and the creases all line up. So I don't think it's these joints have been misapplied at the factory. I think it's just an engineering issue, which is kind of fine. You know, it's an engineering problem with the figure. And you have to accept that it's an action figure at the end of the day. I've not got like a finely sculpted, hand-painted statue in my hands here. But it has bothered me a little bit. I can forgive it. I'm more forgiving of it because the aesthetic quality and the finer details in the wider figure experience drown it out, you know, but it might be something that bothers a few people. It's this, can you see there, just on the leg, the way it sort of juts forward a bit out of the hip. I don't know whether I've tried fiddling around with it. I've been playing with it for a few days now, trying to have straighten it up and make it look a bit more natural. But some of the poses I've had her in, action poses with a rifle, it stood out. So yeah, aesthetically, very happy with my Zarana experience. For fear of repeating myself, I may be using the same words as I said earlier in the video, but she's colourful, she's dynamic, she's vivid, she's got lots of lovely fine detail, but also I can story tell around this figure. The sculpting and the design tells the story, and that's really pleasing to me, which means it gets a lot of ticks in all the boxes I would be looking for from an action figure of this nature, which is great, which is awesome. The little groin joint misalignment might bother some though, but I'm putting that aside, I can forgive that. Very happy with the way she looks. So with a big thumbs up, MoDXtra thumbs up in terms of aesthetic, let's now talk about the articulation. The articulation experience, though, I've got to say, this is probably a boring section of the video because I say the same thing every time with the G.I. Joe classifieds. It's a standard model that they're kind of using now. I'm pretty sure this is the same general book that they've used with Lady J and Scarlet, although correct me in the comments because obviously it's a whole new sculpt. But the head, for example, good up. Oh, I've nearly pulled a wig off there. Let's try that again. Good up, good down, left and right, all the way round, got tilt on it. You know, it's the ball joint and the hinges, the standard experience there, which is great. The shoulders have got a butterfly joint in them, which give a nice bit of shuffle, which helps with the articulation. Although one thing of note is that the in the butterfly joint and in the shoulder joint for the T-shape there, the shoulder pads drastically restrict your ability to move, which could be fine. It depends on what type of poses you want to do, but you'll see later on that one of the accessories, one of the larger bladed weapons that she has, is stored in her backpack over the top shoulder. And when I was trying to get some kind of, you know, drawing it out of the sheath shots, I couldn't, not comfortably, because of the way these shoulder pads restricted the movement. So that's something of note. But then carrying on down the arms, we've got a swivel there at the top of the bicep and tricep. A lovely double elbow. Oh, double elbow on a female figure. Oh, that's some awesome action figure engineering there. G.I. Joe classified folks, walk down the corridor and have a word with the Marvel Legends folks, will you? And tell them how to do this proper. Then the standard pegged in hands so that they can swivel, and then on this right hand, it's up and down hinge, and on the left hand, it's forward and back hinge there, look. Into the main body, we've got a joint here just below the boob line at the top of the abs, which allows for some ab crunch and some swivel at the top, and then there's waist swivel on the figure as well. Not quite as impressive in terms of ab crunch as her male counterparts in the line. Yeah, you know what though, most of them are wearing like body armor and stuff anyway, so that's barely a criticism when it comes to a female G.I. Joe classified figure, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's decent enough. It's decent enough, but yeah, it is a little bit restricted. And as you can see, even a couple of days later, mine's still quite tight in the waist and in the chest area. Then down into the legs, as I mentioned before, got the drop down joint. That gives some really good movement there in terms of the splits. Good forward, bit restricted on the back though because of the arse curve, but that's pretty standard nowadays. This knife in sheath does also affect if you're going for, you know, like a big wide flying kick like that, but I don't think you'd put her in those types of poses all that often anyway. Double knee there, look, lovely jubbly. Get those stirrups into her arse cheek. Boot swivel at the top of the boot, and then you've got the hinge forward and back and the rocker on the feet to help with your posability. Although, on that note, I have found Zarana to be a little bit of a fidgety, fiddly stander. You have to really make sure you've got the feet kind of in just the right kind of position and the legs in just the right kind of position to make her stand. She topples. I've had her toppling a few times. I've got her in just the right spot and I'm about to take my photo in the light box and she'll just go on me. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, she can be a bit of a... Oh, there you go, see? A little bit of a fiddly faff. You know, you've got to make sure you kind of got your angle and distribution of weight right there in the legs to sort it out. But overall, articulation is top-notch. G.I. Joe Classified is possibly the best, in my opinion, when it comes to action figure articulation, certainly in the Hasbro lines at the moment, and Zarana is no different. I'm so happy to see this increased level of articulation opportunity with a female figure as well. Very pleased to see that. I think it's much needed. So yeah, articulation, top-notch. Another thumbs up from the MoDXtra Games and Collectibles review. So now, let's talk a bit about the added value and take a closer look at the accessories. So first things first, we have the wig, hairpiece, swappable hair, however you want to describe it. This one here is in the more traditional, straight-up Zarana cartoon design. She's set up like Lady J. You can pull off one wig piece to reveal this kind of weird, freaky bowl head underneath, and then you can slip the second wig piece on like so. It's a little bit of a fiddle and a faff, and you've got to be very careful to make sure this little kind of sideburny bit slides down in front of the ears in the correct way, but it's straightforward enough. It's just a little bit of wiggle and jiggle until you got it in the right place. And there you can see you can get Zarana in a more kind of classic 80s G.I. Joe cartoon aesthetic with the differing hairpiece. It's just a single pink colour, but the sculpting and texture is just as good as the other piece. I'm not the biggest fan. I think the other one looks nicer. It's a better looking, more aesthetically pleasing one with the orange and pink dye job. But if you're looking to have a more classic 80s cartoon look, then that's available to you. Then you've got a little backpack. It's all a single piece of moulded plastic in this brown colour. It's nice and detailed. It's well sculpted. It's just that classic G.I. Joe classified thing of doing the backpack all in one single plastic piece there. So it's a bit dull, I suppose, but the sculpting is very good. It could do with a wash or a bit of a touch of paint. It definitely stands out on the figure as a bit of kind of plasticky accessory rather than something that enhances the experience necessarily. But that's got a little peg on the back there, and it's the traditional setup that just pegs into the hole on her back, goes through the kind of coat piece at the top and into the main body of the figure. Initially, straight out the packet, that was a bit of a tight fit. You can sort of see on the end of the peg there where I've had to sort of, again, do a bit of wiggling and jiggling to get it to stay in place. But with a good firm push in there like that, you can see it sits pretty strong on the back and is not loose at all. Then getting into weaponry, Zarana's got two bladed weapons. We've got this one, which is just like a little, I described it in the unboxing section as a kind of toothpicky pike mini knife thing, little stabby assassin's knife, and that goes into the sheath on her leg. Super straightforward, like so, in there. And then she's got this nasty piece of work, which is like a heated, battery-powered heated, super cutty, stabby knife. Looks like a right nasty piece of work, this. You can see on the blade there where the plastic moulding changes to the red for the red-hot end of the knife. And then it's got this really interesting sculpt of the hilt and the handle that sort of show off the kind of mechanism that makes it hot and the little trigger that she can pull. That fits in her hand, all fine and dandy-o. Just pop it in like you would any other weapon, like a gun. Or there's a little storage space. You can see this little slot here in the backpack, and then you just slide the knife in. I think that way around, is it? That's the way. Yeah, it just sits into that kind of little compartment at the back there, so that it is sitting, as I mentioned earlier, just over her shoulder there like that. And then finally, we've got her kind of submachine gun rifle-y thing. Looks like another nasty piece of work. The core body of it is a pretty standard kind of G.I. Joe classified plastic moulded weapon. Looks kind of similar maybe to what the Alley Viper's kitted up with. It's not, but it's very similar in tone and style. But Zarana's done a bit of, punk rock swamp gang customization by adding this extra little buzzsaw thing at the front there, which is really sweet. It's more or less a single colour moulded piece of plastic, aside from the paint application of the metallic silvery colour, the kind of gunmetal-y colour on the buzzsaw at the front there, but you can see it's got all the bits of detail in it. And then, as you saw in the unboxing section, the magazine comes out of the little kind of magazine channel there and clicks in like so. So that's a nice piece of kit, a very unique weapon to her that fits in with the kind of Dreadnok, kind of more, I don't know, more down and dirty blade style in there, which I appreciate. But yeah, that's a nice looking gun. And there we are. There's a fully tooled up Zarana ready for action. We've got storage for both the knives. The submachine gun rifle-y thing, I don't know if it's big enough to qualify as a rifle. Gun nerds, let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, all ready for action. But this weapon here doesn't have a storage space on the figure itself, or at least not that I could find. I was looking for maybe like a little. Sometimes they have little pegs on things like the backpack to go through the trigger, but I couldn't see one tucked away on Zarana anywhere here. So she's either carrying that or you're popping it in your bits box if you're not using it. But yeah, there you go. There she is, all accessoried up, ready to get into the fight with some Joes, to or chop some trees around the swamp shack, maybe with the buzzsaw. I don't know, but there's all the accessories for you. So I'd probably say it's a thumbs up for added value when it comes to accessories. There's plenty of stuff to help you tell your story or to give you variety in terms of the way that you pose up the figure, particularly with the kind of offensive method that you choose to use with the Zarana. She's either going to slice you, slice you up with one of the many blades, or she's going to pop a bullet in you while you're not looking. And as I say, if you like the classic 80s aesthetic, you've got that option too. So it's a thumbs up. I don't think it's quite as impressive as some other G.I. Joe classified figures have been in the past in terms of the selection of extra goodies, the little embarrassment of riches, but still pretty decent and definitely in character and in line with the figure, and definitely in line with the kind of storytelling piece that you might want to do with the way you display her. So yeah, happy with accessories overall. For a bit of comparison then, folks, here is Zarana with the leader of the Dreadnoks, Zartan. An obvious pairing when it comes to displaying your figures, because they belong to the same unit and they work very closely together, both in the cartoon and in the comic book. So they're narratively entwined. Despite the difference in the colour palette of the way that they are dressed, you can see there is a consistency, a cohesive kind of tone and aesthetic between the two that tie them together. There's kind of mashing up of sort of, I don't know what you call it, sort of gang, rough and tumble, a bit punk rock gang member aesthetic alongside the kind of more practical combat aspects between the two of them. So Zartan's neckerchief and his belt buckle and his exposed midriff are all in line with that kind of look and feel, and the hood, of course, but then the design of the shoulder pads, the way the knee pads are, it's all just very cohesive, and I think they work well together, despite the fact that the colour palette is distinctly different between the two. Next here, you can take a quick look at Zarana in context next to Lady J, another kind of female figure, but with a kind of warrior aesthetic and tone to her. You could see I've got their legs sort of posed out and slightly bent, so it's not completely obvious, but Zarana is definitely taller than Lady J, but their physicality, their physique, their shape, and again, banging on about it, the narrative of the figures is very, very similar. And so, yeah, I think that's a good match for some nice, oh, God, do you know what? I'm very ashamed of myself. I nearly said for some nice girl-on-girl action. I shall go and have a word with myself in the mirror for that particular misogynistic cliche. Apologies. And while we're on the kind of warrior women of the G.I. Joe classified series line, here she is with the Baroness. This is the retro cardback edition of the Baroness figure. This, by the way, incidentally, folks, I never got round to reviewing on the channel, which is possibly a good thing because Baroness has proven to be one of my least favourite G.I. Joe classified figures due to the articulation, although I think the aesthetic is spot on. But it's a nice comparison. They're both obviously very similar in terms of skill set from the cartoon and comic book perspective around that kind of espionage and disguise sort of function that they fulfill, as well as the the seductress, the femme fatale seductress element that they bring at certain points in the storyline, particularly in the comic books, but very different aesthetic and tone in terms of their kind of combat battle ready look and feel. But you can see again, the physiques are somewhat similar. I think Baroness is a little less muscular in tone by comparison, but they're similar height and build, broadly speaking. As I say, just the articulation on Baroness is a problem overall. Zarana is much more articulated than the Baroness. And here is Zarana with her shelf competitor, old Wonky Shins himself. Yeah, her competitor for the eye when it comes to the more brighter, more eye-catching dynamic colour schemes, the Alley Viper there. But you can see that even with the added splash of colour on the Alley Viper, the orange. It's still very consistent with the kind of browns and blacks and blues aspects. But yeah, there's your main standout splash of colour on your Cobra shelf for sure. Look at them pair together; they make quite the look. So yeah, there we are. There's some figure comparisons for you to get a feel for Zarana alongside some other G.I. Joe classified figs. And here we go then, folks. Here is Zarana making her way around on the turntable, all posed up. This is the kind of position that I settled in, at least for the short term. This is how I've had her on the shelf for about, well, just under a day now, since I stopped playing around and taking photos and such like. But I think, yeah, that's quite a movement suggestive, action suggestive kind of pose that I've got there, so I'm very pleased with that. And I don't think it would surprise anyone to know that as I come to the conclusion of this review, the final thoughts bit here is that, yes, I'm very happy with my Zarana. I think there's lots of positives, lots of things to like, loads of good stuff in the pros column. But mostly, it's the aesthetic. I think the aesthetic, they've really cracked it. I love the hair dye job. I love the face sculpt, the finer details on the figure, the vividness of the pink aspects. Yeah, absolutely spot on. And despite a couple of omissions, like the belt buckle and the slightly action figure-y, uncomfortable fit of the joint at the groin there, overall, very, very pleased. I'm super loving that G.I. Joe Classified are putting out really good quality, high articulated female characters as well. There's definitely a need on that shelf for a little bit more feminine power, and Zarana is bringing that in spades. She's absolutely doing that. I used to love the character in the comic books. I fell in love with the character all over again as a young lad when I saw the G.I. Joe movie and the role that she played in that. So yeah, just loving it. Just loving it. Very happy to have a Zarana in the collection, and very pleased to see the Dreadnoks roster start to get a bit of expansion. So yeah, totally thumbs up all over the place. Loads of thumbs up for Zarana. I would definitely recommend. So there we go, that brings me to the end of my review. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, then I would encourage you to give the video a like and give us a subscribe if this is the sort of thing you like to see in your YouTube recommended subscriptions feed. Otherwise, I've been Chris, this is MoDXtra Games and Collectibles, and I'll catch you guys again sometime soon. Thanks for watching.